Welcome to another Telltale video, and I've been doing a lot of series videos following as many of the works by a particular author as I can get my hands on. And it seems like every time I turn around I realize there's another author that I really want to do this, and you dig deep and get to all their work and have a much more complete understanding of that author. And the latest, admittedly, is one I've never read but should have read by now. This is kind of an embarrassment for somebody who sees himself as a big science fiction fan, and you know, that I love all the science fiction classics, and that I'm knowledgeable about all these science fiction classics. And then I have to sit here and say in front of the camera that I have never read one word of Jules Verne. Well, actually, that's not quite accurate. When I was in grade school, I tried reading 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And I got about 10 chapters in, but I was not a reader back then. And I was trying to read it because I had a teacher that was really pushing at me to get into reading. And I did not read because I had an issue with being able to sit down and focus on what I'm reading back then. You know, I would read a page and realize I have no clue what that whole page said. And I'd have to go back and read it again, you know, because my attention would constantly be going off in other places. It's a problem I still have today, but I've learned how to deal with it. Sometimes I just let my mind go off and I stop reading and come back to it later. Other times I have to shut my mind down and focus on the book, and I have learned how to focus myself, which when I was in grade school I didn't know. So 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea was a total bust for me. I didn't get anywhere near the end of that book, and it was probably biting off way more than I could chew, but it was one of my favorite movies on Family Classics with Fraser Thomas on WGN TV. That and The Time Machine and War of the Worlds. Those were my favorite movies back then, so I wanted to read the book. So that was my one attempt at reading Jules Verne. It didn't get very far. So now I want to correct this. I want to read Jules Verne, but I want to read it from the beginning and try to go all the way through. Now, this is going to be difficult for two reasons. Number one reason, there's a lot of Jules Verne's work that is not easily obtainable. It is not kept in print. He wrote a lot more than the books you're familiar with. You know, everybody's heard of Round the World in 80 Days, Journey to the Center of the Earth, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, The Mysterious Island, From Earth to the Moon, and maybe even Master of the World. But Verne wrote a lot more novels, which were not so science fiction. A lot of them were not fantastic. They were just basically visiting remote areas on Earth. You know, part of his voyages extraordinaires, a lot of the times they were just voyages to remote places on Earth. So they weren't getting into anything fantastical at all. They were relating real places on Earth and just having normal adventure stories of people going there, the Antarctic or South Seas Islands or whatever. And those books haven't been as popular. They were popular in their day. They fell out of popularity fairly quickly after Verne was gone, and now they're very hard to find. But a lot of the novels you still can find, especially if you look online. There are volumes, there are ebooks of the complete works of Jules Verne. You got every novel he wrote, but he also wrote short stories. And those short stories, man, are they hard to find. And what I ran into here is the other problem with reading somebody like Jules Verne, is that I found his very first published short story online, but reading it, I have a very strong feeling that the person, you gotta remember, Jules Verne was French. He did not write in English. Every English version of one of his books has been translated by somebody. And translation is tricky. You got to get the right person. When you're translating a work of literature, you got two big hurdles. Number one is just knowing the language properly to be able to convert it to appropriate words in the second language you're going to, in this case English. And there are languages that have some words that just aren't translatable into English, not accurately. So you run up against that. The second is that the translator has to be more than somebody that just understands the words and the language. They need to know how to write. They need to know how to turn that into a compelling story. They need to know how to take a well-written French sentence and not just turn it into an English sentence, but turn it into an English sentence that is good writing, good literature. That's the trick. And that's something a lot of people are not capable of doing. And you'll find that a lot of, especially free translations, they cut a lot of those corners. You get the story, but you read it and you go, man, Jules Verne couldn't write worth crap, which really isn't the case. It's the person that translated this that can't write worth crap. They knew French and they translated accurately, but their writing just is totally lacking. And I have the feeling, I don't know the person that translated the online version of this story that I found, but I have the feeling that this person is not a writer, at least not a really good literate writer. They were able to translate, but the translation is very workmanlike, just turning the words into English, not turning the English into something compelling. So this first story, The Mutineers, A Romance of Mexico. This is a novelette. It was published in July of 1851 in a publication. I don't speak French, so I'm going to murder this. The publication is Musée des Familles, or Musée des Familles, or Familles, something like that, for July of 1851. I apologize to everybody that speaks French. And the original French title, here we go again, Un drama au Mexique. Okay. This story is pretty simple. You've got, this is in the past. You've got a Spanish ship down in probably the Gulf of Mexico, not too far from Mexico. The sailors on board the ship are unhappy and they want to mutiny and take over the ship. So they do. Actually, it's two ships. There are two Spanish ships, and the sailors, when they go into a port, they're all in a bar talking. They decide together that they're going to take over both ships, and they do. And they kill the captain of one of the ships. So then they set off to Mexico, which had recently won a war of independence against Spain. So for those of you who know history, you now know about when this is taking place, and I don't. So Mexico recently won its independence from Spain, and these guys want to go and join Mexico. So they do. They land, and they want to get to some specific place in Mexico, so they set off into the mountains, walking in order to get to this one town deep in the mountains. And I'm not going to say more than that. It's a nice little adventure story. If you want to read it, I don't want to spoil the ending for you. So the story was okay. The story was interesting. But like I say, the writing style just was too simplistic. It wasn't compelling at all. But I can't blame Verne. I have to blame, well, I mean, you just don't know. If you don't speak French and can't read the original story in French, you just don't know. Maybe it's Verne's fault. I mean, it was his first story. Maybe he wasn't that good of a writer yet. So it may or may not have been Verne's fault. It may or may not have been the translator's fault. And what I've said about the difficulties of translating, I may not be very fair to the translator if he or she had a really bad Jules Verne story to start with. Then it's not fair for me to say that it might be the translator's fault for this not being a compelling story. But I don't know. I have no, without being able to read the original French story, I can't judge it. And that's true if you're going to read any classic literature that is not originally written for the English language. And I imagine it's true for anybody in Italy or Spain or Russia or France that doesn't speak English, that picks up a translation of Mark Twain or John Steinbeck or Ernest Hemingway, and they read it and it just doesn't do much for them. It could be that the translation isn't that good, but they don't know. They have no way of knowing. So it's hard to say if this is a good story or not based on this particular translation. But this particular translation, it just wasn't very good. I was disappointed. I'm hoping that I will really love Jules Verne, but on the basis of this, we got a long way up. So I can't recommend taking the time to find this. It's not much of a story. It's not very long. It's not famous. You got to hunt for it online. I wish there were a book of the complete short stories of Jules Verne. That would be nice, but nobody's done that I can find. So, opportunity. Subscribe to our Patreon so that we can have the money so that Telltale can come to the rescue and publish the complete short stories of Jules Verne. And find somebody that can actually do a compelling translation of The Mutineers, A Romance of Mexico. It's a good title. I like the title, The Mutineers, A Romance of Mexico. That could make a great movie title. And the story expanded by a really good writer, really good screenplay writer, could probably make a good movie, but I don't know. I suspect we will never know. And with that, like us, subscribe to us, leave comments. Have you read this story by Jules Verne? Have you read other things by Jules Verne? Am I going to find this get better? Let me know. And subscribe to us, follow our channel, come back for more videos, subscribe to our Patreon if you want to help us out. And our website, I've got what I believe to be the complete bibliography of Jules Verne on the Telltale Books website. So you can look it up, and so far I have my basic synopsis and review of this story on that website page. I'll eventually get this video up there. I'm kind of way behind on linking videos to our website, but anyway, I will see you in the next video. I hope you'll come back for more of this journey through Jules, or not journey, voyage extraordinaire through Jules Verne. Until next time.